Clint Eastwood has a really interesting story. He was born as Clinton Eastwood, Jr. on May 31st, 1930, in San Francisco, California. That's a city in California with the famous Golden Gate Bridge. When Clint was a little kid, he was actually pretty quiet and serious. He had this special quality about him that would later make him perfect for movies. He grew up during something called the Great Depression, which was a really tough time in America when many people didn't have much money. Going through hard times like that taught young Clint to work super hard and never give up, no matter what. His mom and dad were Clinton Eastwood Sr., that's his dad with the same first name, and Margaret Ruth, his mom. They gave him a good home, even though they weren't rich or fancy. But here's something surprising: Clint was actually a shy kid. He sometimes didn't feel very confident about himself when he was growing up. Those early years of feeling shy but pushing through anyway helped shape who he became. They gave him that tough, real quality that made his movie characters so cool and believable. Clint didn't become an actor right away like some people might think. After he finished high school, he tried out lots of different jobs to make money. He worked as a lifeguard at pools and beaches, watching to make sure people were safe in the water. He also delivered newspapers as a paper boy, probably getting up super early in the morning to throw papers on people's doorsteps. Then something big happened. He joined the United States Army during the time of the Korean War. Now, Clint didn't actually fight in battles or see combat, but being in the Army was still really important for him. The military taught him to be even more disciplined and serious, which means following rules and staying focused. That quiet, tough guy personality he developed would become super famous later on. When he came back from the Army and was a regular person again, that's when he decided to really try acting seriously. He went to different acting teachers to learn how to perform, and he started getting tiny roles on TV shows. Nobody really knew who he was yet. Then his big break came. From 1959 to 1961, he starred in a TV show called Rawhide, where he played a character named Rowdy Yates. Even though he wasn't the main star at first, people really liked watching Clint play this young, determined cowboy. He had this natural coolness that viewers loved, and it opened the door for his amazing movie career that was about to begin. Clint Eastwood became a huge international superstar in the 1960s, and here's how it happened. He worked with an Italian movie director named Sergio Leone on 3 special Western movies that people call the Dollars Trilogy. These movies were A Fistful of Dollars made in 1964, For a Few Dollars More made in 1965, and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly made in 1966. People called these spaghetti westerns because they were westerns made by Italians, and Italy is famous for spaghetti. These movies were totally different from the old-fashioned cowboy movies. They showed heroes who weren't perfect good guys. They were what we call anti-heroes, which means they were kind of in between good and bad. The characters were more realistic and tougher than the squeaky-clean cowboys people were used to seeing. In these films, Clint played a mysterious character called the Man with No Name, and he became super iconic, which means everyone recognized him and remembered him. His character was quiet, really good at what he did, and you couldn't quite tell if he was totally good or a little bit bad. This time period made Clint a major movie star, and it also showed that he really understood what people wanted to see in movies. They wanted tension, that nervous feeling when something exciting might happen, emotions that you could see just by looking at someone's face, and a character who could say more with just a look than with a whole bunch of words. But Clint Eastwood wasn't happy just being an actor. He wanted to make movies too. He became a director and producer, which means he was the boss who decided how movies should be made. His very first movie as a director was called Play Misty for Me in 1971. It was a thriller, a scary, suspenseful movie, and it showed that Clint was really good at building suspense, making the timing just right, and developing interesting characters. Over the many years after that, he made so many films that are now considered classics, which means they're really famous movies that people still love today. Some of these include Unforgiven from 1992, Million Dollar Baby from 2004, Gran Torino from 2008, and American Sniper from 2014. When Clint directs movies, he often tells stories about redemption when people try to make up for bad things they did, morality, what's right and wrong, and how people struggle with tough things in life. His movies show what he believes about life, and he also show that he really understands how people think and feel. And get this, he won multiple Academy Awards, which are the biggest, fanciest prizes you can win in movies. He won for Best Director and Best Picture, which proved that he wasn't just a talented actor, but also an amazing filmmaker whose work influenced people for generations and generations. When Clint wasn't making movies, his real life was pretty interesting too. He's been known for being tough and independent, which means he likes to do things his own way and doesn't let others boss him around. People have always been fascinated by him, not just because of his movies, but because of who he is as a person, someone who's private but also famous at the same time. Clint is famous for being straightforward and no-nonsense, which means he doesn't waste time on silly stuff and just says things like they are. Even though he was a huge Hollywood star, he didn't act like a typical celebrity who goes to fancy parties and wastes money on expensive things. He stayed powerful and important but kept it simple. He even got into politics. In the 1980s, he was the mayor of a beautiful little town called Carmel by the Sea in California. As mayor, he used the same smart, decisive leadership and practical thinking that his movie characters were famous for showing. Now let's talk about Clint's personal life and relationships, which got pretty complicated over the years. On December 19, 1953, when Clint was still a young actor just starting out and trying to make it in Hollywood, he married a woman named Maggie Johnson. Maggie was a school teacher, which means she taught kids in school, and they met somewhere in the Los Angeles area, which is where Hollywood is. When they got married, Clint wasn't famous yet. Most people didn't even know who he was in the entertainment business. Their marriage lasted for more than 30 years, which is a really long time. They went through all the challenges that came with Clint becoming super famous and dealing with the pressures and stress of Hollywood life. While they were married, Clint and Maggie had 2 children together. Their son Kyle was born in 1968, and their daughter Allison was born in 1972. Both kids grew up with cameras and reporters around them a lot because their dad was becoming a bigger and bigger star. Even though they were married for such a long time, Clint and Maggie eventually separated in 1984, which means they stopped living together even though they were still technically married. Their divorce, the official end of a marriage, was finalized shortly after that. News reports said that Maggie received a really big financial settlement, which means Clint had to give her a lot of money, somewhere between $25 million and $30 million. That's a huge amount that showed both how successful Clint had become in movies and how long they had been married. Even though their marriage ended, both of them kept treating each other with respect, and Maggie stayed an important person in the story of Clint's early personal life. Here's where things get even more complicated. While Clint was still legally married to Maggie Johnson, meaning the marriage wasn't officially ended yet, he had another serious relationship with a woman named Roxanne Tunis. Roxanne was a stuntwoman, someone who does dangerous tricks in movies, and a model, someone who poses for pictures. Their relationship lasted a long time, from 1959 all the way to 1973, that's 14 years. This relationship resulted in a daughter named Clint Eastwood, who was born in 1964, which made Clint's family life even more complex and complicated during this time. Roxanne and Clint's relationship happened during a period when he was working really hard to build his career in Hollywood. He was appearing in TV westerns, cowboy shows, and starting to get bigger and more important roles in movies. Even though Clint and Roxanne never got married, their relationship was one of Clint's first well-known romantic partnerships outside of his marriage to Maggie. Their daughter Kimber grew up in an interesting situation. She was the child of a famous Hollywood star who was becoming more and more popular, but she also had to deal with the private, complicated family situation caused by her dad's career and personal choices. In 1975, Clint started a relationship that would become super famous and talked about everywhere, with an actress named Sandra Locke. Their partnership lasted a long time, all the way until April 1989. Sandra was an actress who had her own career that was taking off, and she became both someone Clint worked with in movies and his romantic partner at the same time. She starred right alongside Clint in several films, including popular westerns and dramas that helped make Clint's career even bigger in the 1970s and 1980s. Everyone wanted to know about their relationship. The media, newspapers, magazines, and TV shows paid really intense attention to them. Tabloids, those magazines you see at the grocery store checkout, and entertainment journalists were always writing stories about what they were doing together, both in their personal lives and when they were working on movies. During the time they were together, Clint reportedly had multiple other relationships with other women, and he fathered at least 3 more children while he was still with Sandra. This showed how complicated and sometimes controversial, which means people had strong opinions about it, and some thought it was wrong, his personal life was. When Clint and Sandra broke up in 1989, it ended one of his longest relationships that people knew about and watched closely. But it also meant Clint could start new relationships, and his family would keep growing even more. Clint also had a private relationship that most people didn't know about for many years. It was with a flight attendant named Jacelyn Reeves. A flight attendant is someone who takes care of passengers on airplanes. This relationship stayed mostly out of the public spotlight, which means reporters and regular people didn't know about it. From this relationship, Clint had 2 more children, a son named Scott who was born in 1986, and a daughter named Catherine who was born in 1988. This shows that Clint's family grew through relationships that were highly publicized, everyone knew about them, and also through more private, discreet relationships, ones that were kept secret or quiet. This period of Clint's life shows us the 2 sides of who he was. On one hand, he was a public figure whose career achievements, all the amazing things he did in movies, were celebrated and praised everywhere. On the other hand, his personal life was getting more and more complex and private, with children born outside of marriage and relationships that weren't reported in the news or magazines at the time. After Clint broke up with Sandra Locke, he got into another relationship with an actress named Frances Fisher. This partnership brought both personal feelings and professional work into his life at the same time. Their relationship resulted in another daughter, Francesca Eastwood, who was born in 1993, adding yet another child to Clint's big, extensive family. Frances was an established actress herself, which means she was already successful and respected in her own career. She shared a special connection with Clint during a time when he was already very experienced as an actor, and was starting to make a really big impact as a movie director too. Their relationship was relatively brief, which means it didn't last as long as some of his earlier partnerships, but it was still an important and key part of Clint's personal story during the 1990s. Finally, Clint got married again. On March 31st, 1996, he married Dina Ruiz, who was a television news anchor, someone who reads the news on TV. This was his second official marriage, since Maggie Johnson was his first wife. Their marriage produced one daughter, Morgan Eastwood, who was born in 1996. Morgan became the youngest of all his known children. At first, people celebrated their marriage and thought it was great news. But eventually, like Clint's first marriage, it faced challenges and problems. In August 2013, Dina publicly told everyone that they were living separately, which means they weren't living in the same house anymore. This was a signal that their marriage was coming to an end. The divorce was finalized in 2014, officially ending a marriage that had lasted almost 20 years. Even though it lasted a long time, the marriage couldn't survive the strains, the stress and pressure of Clint's complicated personal history, and all the pressure of being watched by the public all the time. Now, here's the main story. Clint Eastwood is a towering figure in American cinema history, which means he's one of the biggest, most important people in American movies. He's not only celebrated and honored for his accomplishments as an actor, director, and producer, but also for how well he can recognize and appreciate talent in other people in the film industry. When someone asked Clint about which actor he respects the most out of everyone, Clint didn't even have to think hard or hesitate. He immediately said Lee Van Cleef. That's a name that really resonates strongly with fans, which means people who love spaghetti westerns, those Italian-made cowboy movies, and classic Hollywood cinema really know and love this name. Clint's admiration for Lee Van Cleef comes from two things. First, Van Cleef's remarkable craft as a performer, how amazingly skilled he was at acting. And second, his unique ability to play complex, often morally ambiguous characters where you can't tell if they're good or bad, with an authenticity that very few other actors could match. What authenticity means is that he made these characters feel totally real and believable. Clint Eastwood once said these exact words about Lee. Lee Van Cleef was an actor who brought a level of intensity and presence to every role he played that was unmatched. There was a precision in his performances, a focus that you just don't see every day in this business. Let's break down what that means in simpler words. Intensity means really strong, powerful energy. Presence means that when he was on screen, you couldn't look away from him, he just commanded your attention. Unmatched means nobody else could do it as well as he could. Precision means he was exact and perfect in what he did, like a surgeon or a master craftsman. These words show not only Clint's deep, serious respect for Van Cleef, but also that Clint recognized the rare, special qualities that made Van Cleef stand out and be different from other actors in an era, a time period, when Westerns were full of larger-than-life heroes and anti-heroes. Clint's respect for Lee Van Cleef is particularly significant and important when you think about the context of their overlapping careers in Westerns. Context means the situation and background that makes something meaningful. Both actors had careers in Western movies at the same time, and the Western genre defined both of their legacies, what they're remembered for forever. Lee Van Cleef was born in 1925 in Somerville, New Jersey. He started his career as a character actor back in the 1950s. Often, he was cast as a villain or an adversary, which means the bad guy or the enemy of the heroic lead, the main good guy character. While many actors might have been typecast, always given the same kind of role and limited by only playing villains, Van Cleef turned this challenge into an opportunity. He carved out a niche for himself, which means he found his own special place. He became the perfect example of the cold, calculating antagonist, the bad guy who's smart and plans everything carefully, who could command a scene with just his presence alone. Clint, who himself became a global icon, someone famous and recognized all over the world, through his roles in Sergio Leone's Dollars trilogy and other Western masterpieces, recognized and appreciated this exceptional skill. He admired how Van Cleef could communicate tension and danger without relying on overt theatrics. Overt theatrics means big, loud, dramatic acting. Instead of doing that, Van Cleef used subtle facial expressions, small changes in his face that you had to watch carefully to see. A steely gaze, a hard, cold look in his eyes, and meticulously controlled body language, very carefully planned movements of his body, to show and convey layers of emotion and intention. That means you could see so many feelings and understand what the character was thinking just by watching him, even without words. Clint also said this about working with or watching Lee Van Cleef. Working with or even watching someone like Lee reminds you that acting is about more than lines. It's about presence, timing, and understanding the heartbeat of a scene. What this means is that acting isn't just about saying the words in the script. It's about having that special presence that makes people pay attention to you, having perfect timing, knowing exactly when to say something or when to stay quiet, and understanding the heartbeat of a scene, feeling the rhythm and energy of what's happening and knowing when tension should build and when it should release. Clint's praise also shows and underscores the mutual respect that exists among actors who truly understand the craft. Mutual respect means they both respect each other. Even though they're on-screen personas, the characters they played were often adversaries in westerns, meaning they were enemies fighting each other. Clint and Van Cleef shared a deep, profound understanding of cinematic storytelling, how to tell stories through movies. Van Cleef's performances were precise, exact, and perfect, deliberate, done on purpose with careful thought, and emotionally honest, showing real feelings, which are qualities that Clint himself tries to have in both his acting and his directing. Clint has said that watching Van Cleef was like watching a master at work, like watching someone who's the very best at what they do. Van Cleef was someone who could elevate a scene, make it better and more powerful, simply by knowing exactly when to pause, when to look at someone, and how to let tension build up slowly. But there's even more. Clint's respect for Lee Van Cleef goes beyond just his technical abilities, how good he was at the actual skills of acting, to include his professionalism, discipline, and work ethic. These are all qualities that Clint himself has and deeply values. Professionalism means behaving properly and seriously at work. Discipline means having control and working hard even when it's difficult. Work ethic means your attitude about work and how hard you're willing to work. Van Cleef, despite being typecast early on meaning Pradu, Sirs kept giving him the same kind of villain roles, never allowed the limitations of the roles offered to him to define his entire career. Instead, he committed to each performance with unwavering dedication, which means he gave 100% effort that never wavered or weakened. He transformed every single part, even small ones, into a memorable and compelling presence on screen. Compelling means so interesting and powerful that you can't look away. Clint admires this resilience, the ability to bounce back and keep going even when things are hard, and the way Van Cleef maintained his artistic integrity, staying true to his values as an artist, while navigating the commercial demands of Hollywood, dealing with all the business side of making movies and making money. Clint explained it like this. Lee was not just talented, he was committed. He knew what it meant to show up prepared, to respect the story, and to respect his fellow actors. That's the kind of professionalism that earns respect, and he had it in spades. In spades is a saying that means he had a lot of it, like tons and tons of professionalism. This shows that Van Cleef wasn't just good at acting. He was also someone who took his job seriously, came to work ready and prepared, respected the stories they were telling in the movies, and respected the other actors he worked with. That's the kind of behavior that makes other people respect you, and Van Cleef had all of that and more. Clint Eastwood's public acknowledgement of Lee Van Cleef as the actor he respects most is more than just a personal tribute, a way of honoring someone. It's also a testament to the enduring influence of Van Cleef on generations of performers and filmmakers. Testament means it's proof or evidence of something. Enduring influence means Van Cleef affected and inspired people for a long, long time, even after he was gone. By highlighting and pointing out Van Cleef's skill, precision, and dedication, Clint illuminates, shines a light on the qualities that define truly great acting, the things that make an actor really, truly great. It also serves as a reminder that behind all the glitz and glamour of Hollywood, all the fancy, sparkly, exciting stuff you see, respect is actually earned through craft, skill at your art, consistency, being good all the time, not just sometimes, and an unwavering commitment to storytelling, always staying dedicated to telling good stories. In celebrating Lee Van Cleef, Clint isn't just honoring a peer, someone who was equal to him in the business, but he's also setting an example for aspiring actors, people who want to become actors someday. He's showing them that true greatness doesn't come from being famous. It comes from discipline, from having that special presence that commands attention, and from understanding the art of acting that goes far beyond just the surface of fame. Clint ended by saying, "There are many actors I admire, but Lee Van Cleef was something special. Watching him, learning from him, and being in the same world as him, those are experiences that stay with you forever." What a beautiful way to honor someone. Clint is saying that even though he respects and admires lots of actors, Lee Van Cleef stood out as truly special and extraordinary. The experiences of watching him act, learning things from observing him work, and being in the same industry and working in movies at the same time as him. Those are all experiences that Clint will remember and cherish for his entire life. They'll never leave him. That's how much Lee Van Cleef meant to him and how much he respects him as an actor and as a professional in the film industry.